we say this about every season, but Slow Horses might be the best thing on TV, right?
We say this about most new shows that come out from Apple TV Plus. Insert title here might be the best thing on TV.
But Slow Horses has maintained a consistency across 4 seasons, and I think I know why.
Okay,
So I had never read the Mick Herron books before watching the TV series.
sure.
But I picked up the first book last year, and I think this was after season 3. And what's interesting about Slow Horses is that there is a real attention to what the book is trying to do. It's not exactly the same as the book, mind you, but the depiction of the characters are very, very similar. And the writer and showrunner, Will Smith, no, not that Will Smith, the other Will Smith, has really taken note of what the book is about. He truly understands where the book is coming from. And Mick Herron is channeling the old school spy thrillers
Yeah.
of like the Jean Le Carré era in telling the story. And he hasn't deviated from that. It's like he hasn't tried to be clever in 2024 and go, you know what? We can actually spice this up a little bit. No, this is very old school spycraft, telling very, very interesting stories with a serious focus on character. And I think that's why it works so well.
I agree. I think, and this is just a high bar based off of 3 seasons, but I thought season 2 was the least exciting one. Season 2, I found the easiest to fall out of. So much so that I found myself reluctant to get into season 3. I left it till literally about maybe 2 weeks ago before I went into watch season 3, and season 3 is fantastic. Season 3 is, you know what season 3 is? Season 3 was
Yes.
the pilot episode of Slow Horses season 1. That excitement, there's a real ticking time bomb.
It's one of their own.
It's one of their own. It was a very exciting season. And season 4, hoo-wee, great fucking season of TV.
Also, it backtracks, right? Because season 3 had a real action element to it in the last 2 episodes, which we hadn't seen before in Slow Horses because, they're trapped and they're being hunted. And it's the 3rd act of an action movie. And I thought that was very well done because it's executed with these characters in mind. No one suddenly becomes a superhero at the end of that season. Everything plays out just as you would expect.
And the relationships remain the same.
Correct.
They're still sniping at each other. They're still a pain in the ass group of a family that should really show each other a bit more respect and love, but they don't.
But with that in mind, as every season progresses, you actually see real and actual growth. So they're not doing the same things that they're doing in season 1. The sniping is different. Even at the beginning of this season, when something happens, you can see that there is a shift in Jackson.
Yeah.
He is moved for a minute based on what has happened until he figures out what's going on. And I think that's what's really interesting. So they've grown the characters across the seasons. They've done that really, really well. And I think why this season was a testament to how great this show is, for the first time across these 6 episodes, Gary Oldman and Jack Lowden are hardly in any scenes together.
Yeah.
And these are your 2 main characters in the series.
Yeah.
And yet it works. You don't miss it. Because normally you want your main characters together, right? Even if they've been torn apart at some point, you want that dynamic to play out. And yet they barely have a conversation in this season and it still works.
It's because the story demanded so, right?
Correct.
It wasn't a convoluted reason to keep your 2 heroes apart just so that they can come together and win the day.
Also, everyone else is properly compelling too.
Yeah.
Like even Claude, who's a new character introduced in this season as first desk of MI5, is such a wet blanket useless dick, and yet he is so compelling on screen.
Even that new agent, I don't even know his name, the guy that's got his hoodie up, that's constantly just tapping his fingers. Even he, who is in literally maybe 2 handfuls of scenes throughout the entire show, comes into his own and you go like, no, I like you.
It's an interesting character, right? You want to know more about him.
He doesn't feel like cute casting, right? You know how sometimes they'll just have these guys in the background because they want that reaction from an audience member. But here, that reaction is, yes, you're mysterious. I want to know more about you. But also, by the end of it, you're like, no, you're one of us now.
The other thing, of course, is that Slow Horses is a testament to great writing. This is proof that you can do so much in just 6 episodes. It's all killer, no filler. Everything is happening. And trust me, there is a lot happening.
Yeah.
And it's so tight. The mystery is interesting. It keeps you guessing right up until the very end. And it's all just 6 episodes. And 6 episodes of 40, 45 minutes each.
At the end of the 6 episodes, at no point did you think to yourself, I wish I had another episode. Nothing felt rushed. Nothing felt glossed over. Nothing felt dragged out. You know, I mean, fuck, Stranger Things can barely tell the story they want to tell in 4 hour-and-a-half long episodes. And I don't know what the fuck they're trying to do. But here, it's just on point. Everything is pitch perfect.
The other thing about Slow Horses that always gets me is they are so nonchalant about killing off main characters. And it feels real, right? Because it is the world of espionage. Sometimes the deaths are so unceremonious.
Yeah.
That it really takes you by surprise. So much so that something happens in the first episode of this show. And for a minute, I was like, did they? Would they? Because they probably would.
Season 2 was an example of that, right? Something happens to one of our main characters and you just go like, wait, that can't be it, right? You can't have done it that way. And again, I think unceremonious is the best way to put it because there was no circumstance. There was no pomp and circumstance to a character passing. There was no long, longing shots of people crying and just being sad. I'm thinking of that West Wing episode where CJ's bodyguard gets shot. And I'm not saying that was bad. You want to cry him off because he was such a beautiful character in the show. Whereas here, not until that final episode where they, as a crew, go to a small, unknown, forgettable church and just light one out for their fallen colleague. And I think it feels like that's just the way it has to be.
I think that's very fitting with the characters. It's very fitting with the story that's being told. But also it feels like great audience play because you're always at the edge of your seat because you have no idea what is going to happen. And I think that is some very, very cunning writing with regards to how you use death. Because a lot of the time, death is used as a crutch. When a main character gets killed, when someone's lover gets killed, it's usually at the season finale or the season opener. It's used as a crutch. It's used as motivation. Here, it's just the job. And I think that's one of my favorite things about the show because I never know what's going to happen. Also, given that characters live and die on a whim, this is still very much an ensemble piece because even in this season, it's not like Gary Oldman's Jackson Lamb is in every scene or even in every episode. I think there was one episode this season where we don't even see him. And it was something you mentioned in another review that we did recently for the Rings of Power. Everything is happening in the world. Nothing stops, nothing pauses. And for me, that makes for compelling storytelling because even though we're following someone else, we may be following Jack Lowden in Paris or Gary Oldman in a car in the outskirts of the British countryside somewhere, but we know that the machinations of MI5 are still taking place everywhere else.
And that's the sign of great writing, right? But also confidence in your ability to write and the confidence you have in your audience because you don't have to cut back to MI5 to show them trying to hack into a machine or trying to track somebody down.
A very good example with what you were just saying with confidence in your audience. There is a sequence late in the series and it's not really a spoiler, but one of the characters sends a photo to someone. There is no follow-up. We don't see the reaction of the person receiving the photo. We know it happened. That's all you need to know because you know the consequences of what happens when that photo gets sent. And then it's addressed in a throwaway line later. There is a certain confidence in your audience that they understand the weight of what just happened, why it happened, and why they didn't need to show you every single moment.
But also there is an acceptance of this is just the world of politics and government and power structures and power struggles, right? The reason I want to bring it up is because at the end of season 3, Jack Loudon's River has something in his possession. I'm trying to be non-spoilery because people may not have seen it. He has something that was essentially the point of the entire season, right? They open season 4 and they just go, yeah, it got out thanks to River. And then they move on. Because that's what it is, right? You just, shit happens, crisis happens, probably PR the hell out of it off camera, but it's okay. Let's move on. We're addressing that piece of information was kept by River, was released by River, but now it's okay. Everybody got a rap on the knuckles and moved on.
It's very real world, right? Because scandals like these don't often bring down what you hope it'll bring down. Because the system is so complex and so overwhelming, it takes care of itself.
Someone will get retired early, sent to the countryside, and will live off a very comfortable stipend.
Correct.
Also, can I just say, I love how Slow Horses is as much a spy series. It is also just about the unnecessary, dirty, grimy machinations of a governmental system.
Yeah.
We've always thought the MI5 as better than the CIA, right? The MI5 are the responsible ones. The CIA are the ones going around dousing people with acid and trying to make people fly and shit. But the MI5 are the gentlemen in the room. Here they're not. They're constantly sniping at Slough House. They're constantly mistreating everybody. When something happens in this season, everybody's like, oh, but you have to go and save her. She's in the service. And then they all just go, yeah, but she's Slough House though. Is that even service? It's just that thing of like, you fucking dicks, you're all on the same side. Stop trying to be jackasses, right? Like, don't get me fucking started on the dogs from season 3. God, I hate the dogs. But if you know enough of the world, you would come to the realization that, of course, MI5 have got London street thugs. They are the people who 20, 40, 50 years ago would be at the football terraces starting fights.
Correct.
These are the same guys because you need that on your side. So they're not all gentlemen. And I love that. I love that even in a series where they're talking about Russian spies and blowing up London buildings, there's still just a thing about how Second Desk can use a moment to try and usurp First Desk and what that means for the minister who's in the cabinet and how that can push me up the totem pole a little bit more. Ugh.
I really hope there's more of this. I know 4 seasons were done in quick succession. I do believe there are more seasons. I know Gary Oldman has showed interest to continue making this. And of course, the show isn't the show without Jackson Lamb or Gary Oldman. He inhabits that role and he does it so well. It is also unlike anything else he's done. And it is a very understated performance. Even though it feels a bit over the top with him farting all the time, it's actually a very controlled and understated performance that's absolutely brilliant. And watching the relationship between him and River, between Jackson and River, progress over these 4 seasons is also absolutely fantastic. I'm such a fan of the show. I want it to go on. I need more. And I think it will. I think it's got great fan response. It's got great critical response. I can't remember how many novels there are. I think there are maybe 7 or 8. And every season adapts one of those novels.
Which I think is beautiful. I think that's clever writing, right? Instead of trying to force a 12-season episode that covers 2.5 books, just focus on one. Let it be 6 episodes, but let it be a very good, very focused 6 episodes based on just one book. And I think that works very well.
With that in mind, I think then there's a clear trajectory as well as to where the series is going. And what's good about the series is, yes, there are certain elements that feel like thematic arcs, but they don't necessarily affect the event season to season. Like, I think you can start watching season 4 and you will still get everything that's going on. You may not understand the dynamics between every relationship, but for the most part, it's not like season 3 ends with a cliffhanger And then, season 4 picks up afterwards. Everything is very self-contained, with the exception of the relationships and the dynamics between the characters.
I will say season 4 feels like it ends on a cliffhanger.
A little bit.
You don't know if they're going to pick up season 5 with said character.
Yes.
They could have just thrown said character in the hole and move on.
That's the other interesting thing about the show, right? It's shown from Slough House's POV and everyone in the Slow Horses. And so therefore, we don't know what happens at MI5. We don't know how MI5 is going to react. They never shift the POV. So even with the big bad guy in this series, we don't necessarily know the outcome or the complete outcome of that, because we're seeing everything from Slough House's perspective and they're out in the cold. They're only told what they need to know, or what Jackson knows, which is everything anyway. He's just not sharing it with the rest of us.
Yeah, because they don't need to know.
Oh, it's such a great show. More, please. Lots more, please, of Slow Horses. If you haven't seen any, go watch it. If you're a big fan of old school spycraft, I'm not talking about the cool tech and the cool gadgets. I'm talking about hitting the streets and speaking to sources and getting tailed on the street and all of that stuff. Basically the Jean Le Carré style stuff, then this is the show for you.
But even then, it's not Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy kind of spycraft, right? Which is, I'm not saying it's bad, but it's slow. It's very methodical. It's sitting down, thinking through the possible permutations. This is fast, go, but less explosives, no fancy toys. It's speaking to sources, calling up old friends who may have been in places that you weren't at, but is important now. And it all happens really quickly.
Go watch Slow Horses. It is now streaming on Apple TV Plus. Season 4 drops tomorrow. Let us know what you think once you do. Reach out on all of our social media feeds, Goggler MY. You can also email us on podcast@goggler.my, or send us a WhatsApp on the Goggler hotline, 012-524-5208. Thank you so much for listening. This is the Goggler Podcast.